Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the tactics that were used during President Trump's first term and the tactics that most definitely will be used in this term, and how some of those tactics will differ for the sole purpose of undermining, frustrating and hampering, or indeed preventing the president from implementing his program. And let's be completely clear here. This is a program that was voted for by the American people. So this is a platform that the president has a mandate to implement. And yet there are forces out there, well organized, well funded, and in every direction you care to look, that will be dedicated tooth and nail to, again, preventing and hampering the president's agenda. Now, there's a few differences this time. The headline people, the secretaries of departments and so on, are, as far as I can tell, at least based on the announcements that the president has made, these people are committed to, loyal to the president's agenda and the president's policy platform. But they're at the top end. They've got all sorts of people reporting into them, and deputies and advisors and goodness knows what. And there will be amongst those plenty of deep state flunkies and goons and stooges. Some of them will be filled with the guile and cunning of flattery and all these sorts of things, and appearing to be your best buddy, and professional confidence tricksters, if you like, be able to gain the confidence of people and get them to be listened to, and so that they'll frustrate they can frustrate or limit or slow down the agenda through those sort of means. But really what we're looking at here is the deep state realizes that the sort of power and authority to influence and frustrate and hamper that they had in 2016-17, they don't have this time. Certainly not in the same way or to the same extent. But they do have many tools at their disposal, and they will use them all. Don't sell these guys short. They're skilled at infiltrating and undermining from within. I think sometimes that's their only skill, really, apart from treachery and treason. But so they'll be going hammer and tongs at this. Now, what will they be doing now? Well, they'll be looking at, okay, these are the likely directions. And some of that's been announced. I mean, the President Trump's platform is out there in the public domain, so they don't have to do too much guesswork on it. But so they'll be looking at, okay, well, if the president's going to implement this, then he needs to have this legislation, or needs to do a presidential decree, or needs to get this or that passed through the legislature, and so on. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we've got activist prosecutors and activist DAs in Democrat states such as California and New York and so on. And also we'll make sure we've got activist judges, and let's make sure we've got an activist judge here, and we'll be able to bring it to this court. That court has a majority of activist judges, so we can get them to make the decisions we want. We can make sure that the clerk of courts, the administrative apparatus of a court, we make sure that those people will ensure that this judge that we want to hear this case will hear that, so we can hold this up in the court, and we can do this and do that, and we can frustrate that we'll organize these NGOs to go to the courts, so that these NGOs and activist groups, or again, Democrat activist DAs and so on, they will already have the documents pretty much written up, ready to file. So as soon as President Trump or his appointees move in any direction, they're going to get slapped with lawsuits, and those lawsuits will already be written up pretty much. I mean, they may change a couple of words, but they'll already be written up, so that the second that the president's agenda sort of hits they attempt to implement it, whether it's deportation or anything, then the path to prevent it will already be in place. The judges will already know what's going to be required, and the DAs will know, the lawyers will know, the NGOs will will be ready to lodge documents, and the minute that the president's agenda is, they win one court case, there'll be another one instantly along, in the same way as they used the lawfare against Trump, over the previous few years. It'll be done with that sort of architecture in mind, bombardment from all sides with activist judges and DAs and activist operatives and so on. Now, also to do this, they have to, they'll understand that there's a different sort of Trump team in office this time. And so there'll be wargaming and they'll be strategizing about how to overcome this obstruction and this, just what I would argue is treasonous and treacherous obstruction of the president's agenda. So they'll be, again, strategizing over how to get around that. So what these people will already have in place is informants and intelligent undermine, a saboteur, if you like, type operatives, espionage operatives, call it what you will. But they'll be already sprinkled around, and they'll be at the lower level. They won't be at the higher level. I mean, they may be, but you can have someone who, the typist or the word processor operator, or someone who runs the messages or the errands, or someone that just takes shorthand notes at a meeting or whatever. That they can sprinkle these people all about. And there was a bit of that in the President Trump's first term, where they were sticking ops in there that would inform to the media or inform back to their activist goon controllers, who would then plant stories in the media and so on, to create firestorms of supposed confected outrage. So these people will already be, they'll already have put and be putting those people in place in the key sort of information gathering, and pass the information on. So every time the Trump team tries to strategize around the roadblocks that these folks are putting in the way, then that strategizing will be gathered, and they'll be passed on to the deep state machine, which will then be able to alter their position and be one step ahead of the game all the time. And that will already be in place across all the departments. I would argue within the White House itself. I wouldn't be surprised, because that's where they're going to need to see that information, get that information from. So any consideration or thought or plan or program or draft law or legal response, legal document, that will all be, they'll be wanting to get their hands on all of that and have it relayed to their own deep state goon war room. So they'll be one step ahead. Now, the ability to it's not easy when you have people that are skilled at getting on with others and skilled at being your friend and gaining your confidence and this thing. Because if you're in a high stress job, and you've got a platform and agenda you're trying to implement, and that most of the people around you are against you, or at least not wanting to do it, or are controlled by outside influences, then you become more susceptible to people that say, I'm your friend, that sort of thing. And this can go back to the times of ancient Rome and Greece, where or ancient Rome particularly, I'm thinking of now, where sort of professional, I don't know what would you call it, inveiglers are able to sort of gain the confidence purely so they can get a careless remark that can then be relayed to the security forces or something like that. And this was very much the case. So even in Julio-Claudian Rome, and there were people who were professional at this. In fact, that their credentials were, I can deceive and inveigle my way into the confidence of anybody. That's how good I am. That sort of thing. And there are people around that in the public service, and the people, the secretaries of departments that President Trump's appointing will have to contend with all those sorts of things, and they're going to need to pick their lieutenants and their advisors and their deputy implementers of the president's agenda. They're going to need to pick them very carefully, and Now, it's easy to go the other way and get paranoid and just run around sort of getting rid of everybody, and that's as bad as falling into the confidence of those who would deceive you. It's equally as bad. So there needs to be a lot of thought and judgment, maybe to the point where there's some sort of I don't know, methodology, if you like, for if someone isn't actively implementing your agenda, then and there's any doubt or think things are going a little bit slower here than you think they should, move that person off into another area and put someone else in. Be prepared to rotate the people around to see where the problems stay, because it's the equivalent, with these people, it's equivalent to discovering a double agent, or well, it is. I mean, that's what they would be, a double agent, and needing to uncover what is tantamount to espionage. It wouldn't be an overstatement for this. So this is something that again. Now, I've got some experience at this, which is why I'm sort of talking about it. Really, not on the scale that President Trump or one of the departmental secretaries have to deal with, but in an organisation of a few hundred people, as like the EVP sort of guy, and the company was on financial hard times. They were losing money, and they had some heavyweight investors in there that didn't want to lose the money, but they didn't want to pull the pin and walk away from it. They thought there was still mileage to be had. And so various candidates and people were put forward to be the EVP, and each various factions in the company, they all cancelled each other's candidate out, and then they plumbed for a complete outsider, which was me. And so I ended up in the job, not because I would have been selected otherwise, but only because I was an outsider. And so I got the job. Now, the company's problem was they stacked, a bit like a fat, useless public service department. They'd stacked every level of management and everything else besides with friends and relatives and hangers-on and lazy parasites and this sort of. But also there was a lot of corruption. The people with expense account access were running wild, absolutely wild, and little deals were being cut with close friends and intimates where they could engage in all sorts of creative tax management, and that sort of thing. And so people were concerned with just how much they could stick in their pockets. The idea of doing any work or something was, who cares about that? So anyway, then I come along and I assume that everyone accepts that the company's going to go bust if we don't take radical action, a bit like the United States is going down the tubes without radical action. So I said about it and was quite surprised that I was being stonewalled and hampered and frustrated at every turn. Now, the CEO didn't really back me up that much. He wanted the problem solved, but he didn't want any of his buddies and the place was shot through with his buddies. He didn't want any of his buddies upset. So he was, solve the problems, just don't upset any of my buddies, and everybody was a buddy of somebody's buddy and so on. So there'd be the marketing director was a lazy parasite, and she was the CEO's sister's best buddy from high school and college and whatever. So I was told, no, don't upset her. That's my sister's best friend. But it got down to the point where people were conspiring, quite aggressively conspiring to undermine everything I attempted to do. So simple. I guess some of it's quite simple. For example, I would say, well, clean up this part of the warehouse. I want you to do this, this, and this, and they would all nod and yeah, sure, boss. But instead of cleaning it up, doing what I wanted, they simply moved the stuff into another area of the warehouse. So when I'd come back, it looked like the job was done, but in fact it hadn't been. Same way as they were telling President Trump when he said, well, I want troops to come out of the Middle East. Yeah, Mr. President, we've done that. But in fact, they hadn't. And they just, reclassified them or moved them somewhere else or so, filled out a different piece of paper. So it was a tough gig, and the way at first off I didn't quite realize, because they were telling me I wanted to hear and telling me lies and feeding all sorts of misinformation and misinformation, lies, telling me lies and telling me they were doing things that they weren't doing, and denying things that and when you've got so many things to deal with, your time's divided up into very small packets with a million things to do. So you don't have the time to chase down every ball and follow it through right to the end. And after a while, you realize that you have to concentrate on some of the key core issues and put your time into that. And the other stuff, at sub sort of set level, you're just going to have to come back later. But there were a number of people I thought, not a number, there was one or two I thought I could rely on. But some people with sort of huge amounts of guile and cunning and Machiavellian type attitudes to things, again, when you're under stress with very little time, you become more susceptible to those sort of people than you would otherwise. Nor, again, as I mentioned earlier, do you want to be off the charts paranoid, because that's equally counterproductive, if not more so at the end. So the way it washed up, there wasn't anyone I could actually rely on there, and I tried to hire people that would be loyal to me and my agenda, the agenda I was supposed to be following, that the board of directors had given me to follow. But the directors and the CEO blocked me on that they wanted to keep me isolated. So I had to do it alone. There wasn't another way. I was blocked from firing people that I wanted to get rid of. Some of them I could, others I had battles to fight that I could. So anyway, I went back and forth. But the point that I'm sort of making here is it was a huge task to get through an agenda that, again, the board of directors had said, well, here's the agenda that we want you to follow. But then it appears they did everything they could to limit and frustrate that, if it involved compromising their friends. And there were crazy things. There was a guy, and I've mentioned this in other videos, there was a guy who his wife had some multi-level selling thing of women's clothing, and they lived in a quite a well-to-do area of Sydney, and so she would get all her well-to-do friends to come along, and they hire out a fully catered, sumptuously catered, by the way, suite in one of the 6-star hotels in the city, and they would hire out the suite, and then they would do this multi-level selling, and she'd actually hire fashion models to model the clothes, and did quite well at it, as best I could work out. But then she would give him, the husband, the guy who worked in the company, give him the receipts and say, go and claim this on your expense account. So every couple of weeks there was, I think it might have been every week, but certainly every couple of weeks there was this big expense for a few $1,000s, and he would just put it on entertainment. And but these sort of things, that was just one of a gazillion scams that were going on. And this is part of the reason why the company was bleeding money. I mean, you could say today the Democrat Party in the US, they would have an LGBTQ thing or a trans thing, whatever. But it doesn't matter. The money was being blown and wasted on the personal gain of this guy and his wife. So I worked out what was going on, and because I tried to question him, it's just entertainment for an important customer. The CEO knows about it, and he's okay with it. Okay, all right then. So next time I'm talking to the CEO, Billy Bob has got a lot of expense. He says you've approved it. I said, oh yeah, Billy Bob's a good man. Yeah, I've known Billy Bob since junior high school. Oh yeah, Billy Bob's a good guy. Yeah, he's great. He's a great. Okay then. And again, I've got other battles to fight, so I don't go chasing after it straight away. Anyway, finally gets worked out. So I say to him, look, buddy, this stops now. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. And I've even got the guy's wife on the phone screaming at me that you're not allowed to do this and that. the sense of entitlement's off the charts. But these are the sort of battles you have to fight, and they're endless. And that's, of course, on a very small scale compared to what's happening in the United States. But it is difficult, hugely energy sapping. You have to be really committed to fight the good fight if you're going to get it done, because there are, and there will be in the United States, thousands, millions, including big corporations that have had their snouts deep in the trough for a long time. And they're going to lose money over this. They're going to be made accountable for things they don't want to be accountable for. They're going to be exposed for things they don't want to be exposed. The whole globalist project is going to be compromised by this, and they'll fight back in any way they can. Lawfare is one of the things, apart from the more dire stuff of getting school kids to take pot shots and so on. But this is the sort of things that the Trump administration is going to face, and it's going to be a dogged fight all the way along, and we can only hope and pray that the Trump agenda is put in place and his appointees do win. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.